In examples 3 and 4, we are going to learn how to multiply two matrices. It turns out that matrix multiplication is quite a bit more complicated than matrix addition, so we're going to go through this very carefully. In example 3, what we are going to do is we are going to learn how to multiply a row matrix by a column matrix. This particular step or process is actually fairly simple, and this turns out to be the basic building block for the entire process of matrix multiplication, which we will study in example 4. Okay, so in part A here, in part A I have two matrices that I want to multiply. If you look in the notes, you'll see that this row matrix 2, 3 is called A, and this other matrix B is the matrix 5, 4, 5 minus 4 arranged in a column. So we call A row matrix because it only has one row, and we call B a column matrix because it only has one column. So I want to multiply these two things together. Now to do that, what I do is I take the first entry in A and I multiply it by the first entry in B. So if I do that, I get 2 times 5, and then I'm going to add to that the product of the second entries. So I take the second entry in A and I multiply it by the second entry in B. So I add to this 3 times minus 4. So this of course turns out to be 10 minus 12 or minus 2. So when I multiply a row and a column, it turns out that I actually just get a single number. In this case, minus 2. Okay, so moving on to the next example. My matrix A is this row, 5 minus 4 minus 3, and then I have a matrix B, which as a column is 4, 3 minus 2. And I want to multiply these together. So let me kind of color code this here. Well, let's see. Okay, so so I'm going to take the first entry of both matrices and multiply them together. So 5 times 4, that gives me 20. And then I multiply the second entries. So I have minus 4 times 3, that's minus 12. And then finally I do the last entries. Minus 3 times minus 2, that gives me plus 6. So I combine all of that together, and let's see, I think that gives me 14. So the product of these two matrices, this row and this column, is 14. Okay, moving on. 2 times 6 is 12. Again, remember, what I'm doing here is I am taking the first entries and multiplying them together. Then I take the middle entries and multiply them together. So that's going to be minus 5 times 0. And then I take the last entries. So that's 3 and minus 4. When I multiply those together, I get minus 12. So at the end of the day in this problem, I get 12 minus 12, which is 0. The product of this row and matrix is 0. Or sorry, this row and column is 0. Now, coming down to this last example, well, here we kind of run into a problem. If you notice, matrix A, this row, has 3 entries, whereas matrix B has 2 entries. That means that we actually are not able to perform this multiplication. If we tried to do it, what we would get is 1 times 4. Okay, so far so good. Then 2 times 5. But since A has 3 entries and B only has 2, we don't have anything to multiply 3 by. So we cannot perform this operation, and we say that A times B is undefined. So the basic rule here is that we can always multiply a row by a column as long as they have the same number of entries, which was the case in examples A, B, and C, but in part D, we had two matrices with different numbers of entries, so we cannot perform the calculation.